Hello, my name is Sarah, and welcome to my Mississippi Fieldnotes, a series wherein I will be meeting with my peers to explore how they navigate heritage, change, and their sense of belonging as residents of the state. Along the way, we'll engage with the lived experiences of its people, challenging common misconceptions about Mississippi. In this episode, I will meet with Olivia, who will share her perspective on identity and flourishing as a lifelong Mississippian. Our conversation will touch on generational traditions and the impact of HGTV spotlight on her hometown of Laurel. Thank you for being here. So, what moments or places are central to your story as a Mississippian?
Lots of, little intimate places in nature. I like to call myself like a Southern romantic. That's kind of pretentious, but I always feel most connected to the nature here than anywhere else. And my favorite spots are always like long winding country roads, especially during the fall when we actually have fall colors. And those make me feel the most connected to my identity, I guess. Like it's almost like a kinship.
What stories or traditions from your family stand out as defining aspects of your heritage?
I know for me and my family, we grew up, me and my sisters, a little bit separate from the rest of our extended family. So while everyone else was going to all these big family reunions and grew up, living next to their cousins, we kind of felt a little isolated from that growing up. But we still had, the good old banana pudding, Fifth Sunday sings at our church where we would have fried chicken right after. And so it was little moments like that. I think that helped us feel more connected. And then when I got older, I started to realize that it was more so of like a protective kind of thing. This is the word. Just in some senses, not all of these were always the most beneficial places for children to be around. There's a lot of things, I think, around here where bigger families have lots of secrets and things that they don't really let on. That's been happening, and my parents just sort of protected us from it, which of course there wasn't a lot going on. Lots of families have it much worse and have dealt with much worse. But it was, I think, very much a protective sense of we're going to do things differently with our kids, raise them differently. Yeah.
How do you see yourself as both continuing and challenging the generational patterns of your family?
I think a big one with that is taking what's good and being okay with discarding what's not, while honoring that it served my family for generations, but being able to see, hey, this isn't really a healthy way of thinking, this isn't a beneficial way of thinking, and it doesn't really reflect the values that I have and the way that I see the world. I think being able to honor that it did for them while being able to say this doesn't work for me is a big thing, because that's just not typically what happens here. You're kind of expected to continue on in that same thinking and be really linear, I guess.
Yeah, have you received any pushback from?
Oh yeah, for sure. For starters, I'm 24 and I'm not married, which is a big one. Everyone's getting a little nervous about that. I'm like, I'm fine, it's okay. And it's half of it, I feel like I'm a rebellious teenager, and then the other half is me really establishing, I guess, agency over myself, like cutting my hair off. Things like that. That's not really, got to keep the hair long, so different things like that.
How has the idea of home shifted across generations in your family?
Well, I know on my mom's side, she comes from a long line of Southern Baptist pastors, and they were always moving around growing up. So she grew up mostly in North Mississippi, and that's where her side of the family's from. And funny enough, it feels like a completely different world there. The accents are different. The food can be different. A lot of the jokes are different, and I don't always get it. And my dad, his side, like, has been here, it's probably same land or around the same land for generations. And so I think those two factors kind of resulted in me having this sort of, not Jekyll and Hyde, but kind of contrasting views of home and what that looks like, whether it's a place or, you know, the hallmark. It's who you're with, it's where you want to be, things like that. So I think that, and I still stand by, if I weren't surrounded by trees at all times, I would freak out. So I know that that's where I'm meant to be, is around trees. So wherever that takes me, yeah.
I love that. How do you think that this sort of home shift connects to the way you understand place and belonging?
Let's see, I remember when I moved to Jackson, which is only about like an hour and a half away from here for school. It was a big shift, because I remember I was always the one that was expected to not leave our hometown, to stay, to live my life in the Louisa May Alcott way, you know, and just take care of her family. And then I moved off to Jackson. I was like, wait, both things can exist at the same time. I can care for my family and love them and still see the world, which I still haven't seen very much of. But I think I've been really dealing with that kind of dynamic lately of, you know, still paying my respects to where I live, having a tender spot for it, but also being open to the idea that home could be elsewhere, and it wouldn't eliminate the time I spent here.
Then how do you reconcile the pull of home and also heritage with your desire for perhaps change?
Still working on that one. Most times I try to take it a day at a time. Of course I use Pinterest to travel the world. I think that one for me comes down to oodles and boodles of self-compassion and acceptance, because I think my initial instinct is to say, no, that's wrong, you need to stay here, you need to take care of your neighbors and your family, and of course you can still travel and take care of your family, which is something that hadn't occurred to me until a few years ago. So really I think it's just taking it a day at a time, taking little trips, exploring the world. I still have this thing where when I'm off somewhere by myself, I just feel a little lost and confused, like I'm not supposed to be here right now, like I need to go home and get plugged back in down here.
So now, considering the impact of external recognition of Mississippi as a Laurel resident, could you share a bit of your perspective on Laurel's sort of newfound fame through HGTV?
Yes. In a word, I would say bittersweet. I'd say, like, economically, financially, it's been really good for us. Tourism is something that's been introduced, which was bizarre to me until, recently. I remember coming home for school breaks and people were on golf cart tours, and I was like, that can't be street legal. And it is. But on the other hand, there is, it starts feeling a little less like something that belongs to you and a little bit more like something that's can be kind of a showcase for other people. Working in the service industry, a lot of times I love tourists. They're all incredibly sweet for the most part, but then you'll have every now and then your few who'll come in and you can tell that they kind of see us as sweet little puppies almost, I would say. And it can be a little dehumanizing, I guess, in a sense. That may be more of an extreme word to use, but I guess you have to take the salt with the sugar on that one.
How do you think this external recognition has impacted the community's sense of self and identity?
I think it's become a little confusing because now there are different, like, I guess, hierarchies of locals. Oh. There are the locals who have been here for 10 years and feel in their hearts that they're locals. And I'm not the type to be like, no, you're not allowed to do that because you've been here for like a decade. And then there are the people who have lived here their whole lives, who don't live in the city limits, who live out in the sticks, as I call it. And I think it can get a little, not dysmorphic, but it can be a little confusing sometimes. I think just in a general sense, it has become better in a lot of ways, and it's become a little worse in a few, I guess. But as with anything, I've met several of the people who work with the show, and they all seem really wonderful. So I don't want to come across like, I hate that show. It's been horrible, because it has, and it's brought a lot of really wonderful people here. But at the same time, you have to deal with things like cost of living going up here, and then natives who've been here for a while already coming from generationally impoverished households, unable to kind of get a leg up. So it's been, I guess, kind of a mix of that.
Right. Have you observed any changes here as a result of this external recognition?
Yes, a lot of our roads have gotten paved, and that's been incredible. That's been awesome. Let's see, you have lots of people moving here from all over, and they come to visit, and it kind of, I've experienced, for me, when I first came home from college, I was so, I think, disgruntled about moving back home after college, feeling a little like, well, I thought things were supposed to pick up after this, which I don't think moving back to your hometown means things aren't going to pick up, you know. But I remember as the months would go by, and I started working more in the service industry and things like that, being able to look at the town from tourist perspective really helped, I think, heal some of that, I guess, anger that everyone has towards their hometown, and really helped me to see it as beautiful again, which has been really incredible. Yeah.
That is incredible. How do you navigate the external perceptions of Mississippi with your internal experiences?
That one can be tricky, for sure, because, of course, a lot of the, I guess, general stereotypes about Mississippi have a reason for being there, which isn't to say stereotypes exist for a reason, you know, because anyway, I think it's been something that's allowed me to be more mindful, I think, of being able to say, yeah, that's actually a little true, or that's actually a little horrible, but also being able to raise up equally, but that's not all there is to us. You know, there are others here who have moved here or have lived here, who have dedicated their lives to making things better, who stay here despite opportunities in other states to try to make things better, and I think that their stories are just as important as the bad ones.
What stories about Mississippi do you wish were being told more prominently?
I know that Mississippi is a majority African American population. We've got a large indigenous population as well, and I think that those voices should be heard a lot more than they are, instead of, I guess, the microphone being given to voices who don't really need to be amplified.
And for you personally, what do you think it means to be a good ancestor?
I think that starts with acknowledgement. And I was thinking this earlier, letting yourself feel just enough shame to be able to say, this isn't right, and work through it from there, and not sit in that shame, not say, oh, I did this, blah, 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 blah. But be able to be proactive about it in response, because I think a lot of people from generations to generations have just sort of avoided that kind of acknowledgement, because I think the guilt is immense and the pain is immense just in general. And so I think a lot of the rebuilding, I guess you could say, community-wise, is going to start with little moments of acknowledgement, being able to say, wow, this really wasn't normal or right, in a sense, and being able to take it, do away with it, and then set yourself to doing the opposite.